Have your life turned into a movie directed by Wes Anderson or Christopher Nolan?
For those who are not movie aficionados, I know these directors' names, I know some of their movies, but Sam, maybe you can describe a bit of the differences between these two directors.
So Wes Anderson's kind of going to be quirky and comical. Every single camera shot is going to be centered. So everything is going to be kind of symmetrical and in the center. There's not going to be any kind of weird like angles from on high or anything like that. It's all going to be symmetrical and quirky and quite fun. Christopher Nolan is going to do something weird with time. Even if you live your life normal in a normal time direction, he's going to tell it in an interesting way, like Dunkirk, for example, where there's the three different arenas of battle for Dunkirk. One of them's done over an hour, one of them's done over a day, and one of them's done over a week. And he's kind of showing shots from each of these scenes all throughout the movie. So even though I'm such a big Nolan fanboy, I don't know if my life is epic enough to have that big twist or something. I don't know what the twist would be. And I don't know if it's dark enough to be like that compelling told in that Nolan's way. So maybe give me the quirky Wes Anderson, I think. I don't know if I'm funny enough either, but maybe it'll make my life more funny. I'm not sure.
It was not the answer I was expecting from Sam.
I mean, look, which one do I want to watch? I'll watch anything by Nolan, but I don't know if there's enough material in my life to give him something good to work with. I feel like I'd be letting the guy down.
You don't think Nolan could make your life seem more epic than it is?
Wow, that's true. Perhaps. Just do a Google image search for like Wes Anderson movies or shot or something like that, and you'll all see that it's like kind of the symmetrical vibe with like bright colors and yeah, it's quite interesting, his style.
I actually haven't seen too many of his. I mean, I've seen Fantastic Mr. Fox, but maybe that's not a typical Anderson movie based on what I'm seeing in the other stuff.
Uh, yeah, the Grand Budapest Hotel is the one that I'd recommend the most. It's very funny. It's quite good. And also Isle of Dogs. Isle of Dogs is quite good.
I love Moonrise Kingdom a lot. Yeah, I would definitely go for Wes Anderson. I really like his films. I haven't seen them all. Like, I'm not that much of a big fanboy that I've seen every single film he's done, but the films that I've seen I've really enjoyed. My favorite is Moonrise Kingdom. He's able to transform, I think, any sort of old boring story into kind of like looking really nice and being kind of quirky and funny. So I think kind of what Sam was latching onto there was the fact that it's like, even if our lives are probably not movie worth, maybe Wes Anderson would be the right person to transform that into a film that people would be interested in watching.
I'm gonna have to go based off like what I've watched, but also who was the brother of Christopher Nolan, Jonathan Nolan, who of course has made a lot of good movies, and also one of my favorite TV shows of all time, which is Person of Interest. So I am locking in the Nolan because if Christopher works on it, maybe Jonathan gets involved too and makes an awesome TV show or a movie out of my life, which wouldn't be that exciting, to be honest. But it'd look good and it'd be somewhat epic and mysterious. Maybe who knows?
The Nolanception. Maybe in the Nolan movie, you'll be watching other Nolan movies. Or maybe you'll be watching yourself watch the movie of yourself, which would then be watching a movie of yourself. I don't know. I think he'll find a way to make it clever.
Well, maybe he makes a movie about Shem inventing raiders or something like that. Like this kind of like time bending story about this board game or something. I don't know. Could it work?
Or maybe there's like a Viking way back, 1,000 years ago or more that's making a game about the future. And we're both designing these games simultaneously at different time periods about each other. Oh,
Yeah, that's nice. I like it.
Do you guys feel like you are the main character? Like in your life? Like, because we all have that perspective, but like, do you feel like you give off kind of main character energy or not? You happy being a supporting cast member?
Are you a narcissist? Uh,
A little bit.
Sex the
I
main
think we all
character.
feel that way. We all feel that way, and like we can't not feel that way because it's how we perceive the world, right? But yeah, I don't know. That's a tough one to actually like honest. You have to ask honestly. I'm trying not to be. Let's put it that way. I'm trying not to be the main character, and it's very difficult.
Nice.
Yeah. Humility is hard.
There's a movie called Patterson, which was just like a week in the life of a bus driver. And it showed me that you can do a mundane movie where you're not saving the world or falling in love or anything like that and make it really interesting. And it was kind of just like celebrating the mundane, celebrating just the people that do their 9 to 5 well. And it was just a really beautiful story. It was a beautiful movie. So, maybe our lives are movie worthy. Watch the movie Patterson. It's Adam Driver. It's great. It's a really good time.
Yeah, I really like a TV series called The Bear, and I'm sure many people have seen it because it's been quite well regarded recently. But they get quite artistic in some of the episodes, and they'll just spend like a whole episode covering like a dinner, like a family dinner, or like a whole episode covering this wedding, and it's mainly about a restaurant. So the series is about a restaurant. But, one of the episodes, and I can't remember if it was season 2 or 3, the whole episode was just about one of the kind of like supporting characters, like one of the supporting chefs and the character chefs in the series. But it's like her normal life and like her day, like arguing with her husband and going to work and then coming back being tired and being discouraged and just kind of all that kind of mundane stuff. Even though the series is about the drama that happens in the restaurant, they just spent a whole episode just on one person. And I have to say, it was really cool. And they've done that a number of times with different characters that aren't even like the main characters. And I think it makes like the episodes where it's like everyone together in the restaurant, it makes it more meaningful because you're like,
Right.
you actually care about like all the characters, not just like the 2 or 3 who are the main characters. And so I think that's really interesting. I like it how some TV series are taking kind of those chances, I guess, because it's kind of a weird thing to do.
And it's sort of happening in board games now as well, right? Where, board games aren't all about like the big, broad building up a civilization, taking down all the other civilizations. No, you could play a board game about brewing tea or like growing mushrooms, just something like kind of like just quite mundane now, but it's kind of refreshing for people, I think, as well. Like it adds this layer of respecting the ordinary and appreciating the ordinary is probably a better word than respect. Like, yeah, gratitude and all those sorts of cool things.
Or one of the most famous board games in recent times is about like bird watching, basically. I guess Wingspan. I guess that's sort of the theme. How many people are into bird watching? Like quite a few, but it's also not like that mainstream. So
speaking of board games about mundane things, should we talk about throwing rings into lava and destroying dark forces and orcs and all that stuff that happens on the daily?
I thought you were going to say, speaking of bird watching, let's talk about foul beasts.
Yeah, that's better. Let's do that one.
Welcome to the Lens and Veil podcast. Join Shem, Sam, and Zach as they dive into a designer-focused analysis of Fate of the Fellowship by Matt Leacock.
So it was highly likely, if you are listening to this episode, that you've played at least one version of the many pandemics that are out there. Today, we're talking about a certain special fantasy one based on Lord of the Rings, specifically about Frodo trying to get the ring to Mount Doom and Mordor to throw it into the fire and destroy it. So that is what we're talking about. Maybe you've seen this game online recently. It's been in the hotness, so we thought we'd play it a bunch and cover it, talk about some of the differences between pandemics, why we like this game or dislike this game over certain other pandemics, and just what kind of makes it stand out from a mechanical side point of view, but also from like a thematic point of view, how they treated the theme, that kind of thing, because I know you guys are both very much Lord of the Rings fans, as am I. Probably you guys more so than me even, knowledgeable about the world and stuff, and the world building of the game, and of the whole series of all the books and all things like that. So in this version of Pandemic, it follows a very similar kind of pattern for your turns. You are taking actions, and a little bit different there than the original. And usually it's you take 4 actions. Some versions have just 3 actions. But this one, you're taking 4 actions with one character and then 1 action with a different character. So you control 2 characters. Then you're drawing 2 cards, much like many Pandemic versions, including the original. And then you're kind of revealing the threats and resolving those cards. A little bit different from original Pandemic, but kind of following a very similar structure, at least, to how the threats are played out. Your aim of the game is to achieve the objectives set out before you, which will be, I think it's anywhere from 3 to 6 face-up objectives. And these will be a variety of things that, as a team, you must achieve. Like you must have this person in this spot with this condition true, and then spend an action and achieve this thing. Depending on how many you have of those objectives, you can do them in any order, except that the final one is always the same, and you must always do it last. And that is, of course, Frodo being at Mount Doom, throwing the ring into the fire, spending 5 rings, and so on. So on the sort of the topic of differences, one big difference is that in classic Pandemic, it's all about getting sets of 4 or 5 of one color, casting them into a certain location and kind of ticking the box saying, hey, we've done green, we've done blue, we've done yellow, whatever it might be. And the original Pandemic is you're doing 5 cards, some are less, some are a bit of that, bit of something else. In this game, it's not that at all. So in this game, you do need 5 rings at the end to throw into the fire, which is one of the kind of card types. But the objectives will kind of drive what else you need those cards for. And in addition to that, each character you play as might have some kind of power, which is spending a certain type of resource for either dice mitigation or movement or whatever it might be. And you're also spending these cards, these resources for certain parts of the map you have to move through. You've got to spend resources. Or you might be spending them such as the hearts to deploy additional units to the map, which help you fight off the invading dark forces. Yeah. So where do you want to start, guys? I think maybe we start a bit about some of the differences, where these come from, maybe. For me, the main similarities I've seen in this version of Pandemic is the fighting mechanism,
right,
which is very similar to what we saw in the Fall of Rome. So you are deploying units onto the map, using those to roll dice, fight battles, trying to remove the bad units while not losing your own units. And the other one is the missions, which I think we saw it first in the Star Wars, the Clone Wars,
right,
or Clone Attacks version. There was a sort of a mission type system in the Warcraft version of Pandemic, but it's a bit different. But I do think that this version is taken mostly from the Fall of Rome and Star Wars versions. Discuss.
Yeah, so talking about the combat, I think it's quite cool. In OG Pandemic, you can walk around and you can just cure stuff on your own, just pick up these disease cubes and stuff, which is cool. But it adds this layer when you have to move units around to do the fighting for you. And it's this extra lever, it's this extra resource that you have to manage. And then it adds also this layer of strategy around dropping these units off as well, because you can drop them off and you can kind of get them to defend for you in places that you think are going to be vulnerable. Once we started using that strategy, it really opened up the kinds of plays that we can do in this game is actually not only just moving these troops to fight, but dropping them off to defend paths where we're going to be susceptible to damage later in the game.
I think it's worth me giving the caveat that the only Pandemic game I've played was Pandemic Iberia, and that was like 8 to 10 years ago. So I kind of came to this game without this kind of background of all these Pandemic games that the other guys had played and were comparing it to. But yeah, if talking about the whole fighting system, I really like how it works and that feeling, having played Pandemic Iberia, things that can pop up kind of anywhere and spread out from what I remember. But this time you've got these very clear areas where the enemy is coming to you from, but because of how, the Lord of the Rings story is, it's basically like half of the map anyone can show up from, and then there's a few enemy strongholds even kind of like in the middle of the map where they can show up from. So you have a lot of potential places that they can show up, but you also know where, more or less where that's going to be, and so you can set up your troops to defend those sorts of areas. There's kind of a bit of randomness in which ways the enemy is going to move, because there's all these multiple paths. So sometimes they could move one way and then actually move back if a different card comes out because they want to go attack somewhere else. But yeah, I liked that level of control where you kind of had a general idea about where the enemy could show up. And even more so as you kept on playing the game, because there's this mechanism where the game's kind of getting harder, but you reshuffle all the cards that you've brought out so far. So you kind of know that those are the cards that are going to come out again. Maybe not each card has a double use, so they might not be used to move the troops. It might be used to place more troops. But you've seen a lot of those cards before, so you can start to have a good idea about where the main crisis points are on the map in your play of it.
Yeah, and that's very much classic Pandemic, like the whole system of you're revealing cards, and then at certain points, that magic card comes out and they get shuffled a bit back on top. That is the magic right there of Pandemic. And a system is that threat system, the deck shuffling and go back on top. I think why this attack system works well is really in combination with the map. So in normal Pandemic, the map is, while it is the world, it kind of has a vanilla feel to it where until you play it a lot, every location is essentially the same. Like you start to learn the map pretty well after a lot of plays, and South American block can blow up quite easily if you don't keep an eye on it.
And Santiago, we leave alone for ages.
Yeah, if it starts to blow up in Asia, that's a lot of ground to cover. So that there is flavor, or I guess a personality to the map that you start to learn. But as far as where things can appear, like you were saying, Zach, in this one, but talking about the other one, where things can appear can feel quite random, and in a good way, where it's everything is kind of accessible. You can wrap around the world. You can move fairly freely. In the Lord of the Rings, and it's true of the Fall of Rome as well, you kind of have a far more scenario feel to the map where you are progressing through the map, especially this one, from the Shire to Mordor. So you are kind of following a path. You jump back and forward a bit, but you kind of, as a group, mostly sort of converge on Mordor. So those points where the enemies come from is really important for that. There's no enemies spawning in the Shire, right? It's kind of like once you've stopped that flow, then you can leave it alone. Whereas in normal Pandemic, you can't do that. You can't just, let's just ignore the America. We can't do that because it might blow up suddenly and you've got to go back. And you can go back. Whereas in this game, if those enemies showed randomly and they were somewhere that you don't want to be, that's a lot of movement to get back and fix the problem, right? Like, and there's not that kind of free movement like you might have with the research stations in Pandemic. So I think really like the map and that attack system, that the flowing of units from certain strongholds are working really well together in this version.
Yeah, and like somewhat there can be a few troops show up randomly in some areas that you weren't necessarily expecting it when I think it's when the skies darken events show up, right? Where it might spawn. I think in our last game we had a few spawn sort of near the Shire, like on the path towards the Shire, in a place where they wouldn't usually spawn. And so, it can throw out some curveballs for you, just, to keep you on your toes. But yeah, it's mainly working that way that Shem said.
Yeah, I really like that point, Shem, and it makes the game feel very thematic, like the fact that they're not spawning in Rivendell, they're not spawning in Hobbiton, but each game still has its own distinct feel based on the cards that we have and that are cycling over more often. Like we might be invaded from Run, all the Easterlings have come, and we're really worrying about Erebor and those towns over in the kind of the northeast area. But then the next game, it's just all on Saruman and Isengard, and that's where they're starting to kind of break out and harass us from. And so you get that feeling of the thematic, like, if you know Lord of the Rings, you know the places, and then you kind of visualize the types of forces that they even are, if you're a Lord of the Rings nerd like me. But you also get that replay value that you would get in normal Pandemic because it can still vary amongst those evil places. And because they're going to keep cycling around, you can strategically drop off troops, as I said, but you can also strategically turn the strongholds that are the most prevalent in the current deck that you're cycling into havens, which is a really cool feature in the game as well. But while we talk about this threat system, Shem, I wanted to get your opinion on one of the bigger changes in this game, which, you talk about loving that core system of the threat deck in Pandemic, and particularly the way that they, shuffle these cards back. But the two uses to the cards, where the back of the next card that's going to show up in the threat deck is going to determine how you interpret the card that you just revealed. What do you think of that system?
Yeah, it's a nice twist for sure. I mean, what it's really doing at its heart is either moving troops closer to attacking your havens or putting more troops on the map and generally moving around the ring wraiths or the Eye of Sauron. Like, that's kind of what it's doing, either that or that. And yes, it's the same card, and based on what the next card is will determine if it's top or bottom part of the card. So it's not always the same effect every time it comes out, but it's kind of doing a similar thing, really. Like, it's going to either move troops along the path from Nirn, or it's going to put a new troop in Nirn and then move to ring wraiths. So you kind of, I don't know, I didn't feel that it was random, like which of half was coming out. I suppose you didn't get as much identity to those cards as you might in normal Pandemic. Like in normal Pandemic, you're like, I know that specific card is in there, and if that card comes out, we're dead. You don't get that feeling in this. Like, you're not dreading a certain card so much. It just feels like a constant flow of threats in a way.
Yeah, it makes it harder to card count as well, because you're like, there's a few Isengard cards in there, but because you might not do the Isengard portion of one of them, you don't actually fully remember how many there are. But there's also this thing where, say in Pandemic, where, okay, in this particular threat deck, we're getting a lot of Asia, and you can kind of get slammed. Well, that sort of thing can happen in this as well, where you're getting a lot of Isengard, as I said, or a lot of Mordor. But the other thing that can happen in this, and I noticed in one or two of our plays, is instead of getting a lot of a particular location, we just had a lot of red flags in the cards that we were cycling. And so the people are just moving a lot in this play, more than normal. But then if you have the opposite, if you get a lot of black flags, like if it's not an even distribution of red and black, it really changes the puzzle. So if they're moving a lot, it means you need to move a lot and get in their way. But in the other version, when there's a lot of black flags that show up, you need to constantly move Frodo out of the eye and stay away from the Nazgûl. And then also you need to go and fight a lot of troops so that they can keep spawning them. Because if they can't keep spawning them, then you're going to lose hope. So there's the different flavor, not just on the places that are showing up, but the distribution of red and black. It's not always noticeable because it's usually around 50-50. But sometimes if you get that weird distribution, it's also going to change the puzzle for you based on if the troops are moving a lot or spawning a lot.
Yeah, and if they're not moving a lot, then it's actually harder to draw the eye away because
Yeah.
you generally
Yeah.
fight to draw the eye, and then it's like, oh, actually, I need to walk like 3 or 4 spaces to go pick a fight with someone. So it can kind of be, a bad thing if they're not walking closer to you.
Yeah, that really is quite a big difference from the original Pandemic, I think, because I didn't really notice that so much. I wasn't thinking about the distribution of those, top and bottom card kind of focus, I guess, for the threat deck. Whereas in, like I was saying before, in normal Pandemic, you learn those threat cards really well. I think in this one, you're far more focused on the objective cards. Like, I'm not so worried about managing or forward planning what they might do. I'm more thinking, how can we achieve what we need to do?
That's right.
Which it's definitely there in normal Pandemic. Like, you're trying to get those cards together. Like, someone needs 5 yellow cards. How are we going to sort it out? We're going to do it together, and I'll meet you here and I'll give you this card. That's still here in this game as well, but you're far more focused on the objectives, which is quite a cool, and I wouldn't say it's unique, but it's definitely a very strong feature for this version of Pandemic, where you have a deck of, I think, about 30 odd objectives. You're always playing with that last one. That's always the final thing you have to do. But they really changed up the game quite a bit.
Yeah.
And we played, Sam and I, with Zach on a couple of games, played through every kind of pre-written objective in order, starting out with the basic intro game and leading up to the big final 6 one. And then we played 2 games together, the 3 of us, with basically random. We essentially chose our characters and then drew missions, 6 missions in total, that lined up with the characters we'd chosen, like, so that we didn't have to bring out new characters or anything like that. And I was expecting it not to work. I'd heard some early reviews that they can be too swingy, too random, the combinations, but I mean, it's only 2 plays that we had. They felt good to me. Like, they felt like they worked well. So I'd be curious to play it more and see if there is a version of this game that's a bad game, like a bad combo. I wouldn't go as far as saying an unwinnable combo, but there'd be some that would probably be quite hard to achieve. But from our experience, I didn't see that as an issue.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts on the mission kind of side of things?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think in this game, it is slightly less about fighting fires. There is still that element, like, we don't want to lose Helm's Deep. We're going to lose 2 or 3 Hope. Can't remember what it was. We should go and deal with that. But it much more feels like you've got agency to go out and do your objectives and sort of efficiently fight fires on the way. Like, as you're going to do this, would you go and deal with those orcs over there in Rohan? They're being a bit annoying. It feels less like the game is forcing you to go and, like, do this to prevent losing and then go over there to do this to prevent losing. It's very much more like you were saying, Shem, about forging your own path to victory, meanwhile keeping an eye on the things that are going wrong. And I think at 3-player, it's a little bit easier to do that. At 2-player, if we just happen to be in the same locations, we can't really spread around the map very easily, So there are some interesting things to say about the scaling as well. But yeah, I agree. I like this approach where you get to kind of take control and you have a little more agency and get to play the game more than the game playing you, which sometimes in Pandemic, it feels like I just need to go over to Moscow and deal with that. That's all you need to do on your turn.
I do think that if you've played Pandemic and you weren't impressed, you thought, it's okay, but, didn't love it. I think this version will probably appeal to those people a lot. It doesn't feel as puzzly or as abstract, I guess.
Yeah.
So it's like the theme is definitely here, and they've done a great job of the IP in this game. This kind of version of co-op, I think, is often referred to as like spinning plates, where you're constantly trying to do multiple things at once. Which thing's going to fall first? What's the most pressing thing to address? Like, how could we die first? Let's focus on that. And you're constantly, in any version of Pandemic, trying to like stop this thing and then that thing and then jump over there and fix that thing and kind of keeping all your plates up in the air. This doesn't feel like that so much.
Correct.
And I think, while I love that kind of that constant pressure of things falling apart in a co-op game, I think there are players who don't like that in games, and they would rather just enjoy the process and the thematic side of things and the cooperation and just oh, I'm this guy, I'm moving here, I'm doing this thing, and not worry so much about the entire map and what is the grand scheme. And you can just focus more on your little objectives and, can we achieve this thing today? On next turn, do this thing, and not worry so much about every little mathematical probability of which card will come out and what will happen and weigh it all up in the air like you would in Pandemic. So, yeah, that's just my thoughts on. I think some players will enjoy this more because it's less of that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it felt much more like, how are we going to complete all these missions? That was the real question we had, right? It was like looking through the missions, like, all right, how are we going to complete these? What order? What is the most efficient order? Because you still are under time pressure, right? Because of the deck of cards that you pick up, of items and stuff. If that runs out, you lose the game. Is that right?
You start losing hope. Yeah.
Oh, you start losing hope, and then you'll eventually lose the game. So, you're still under time pressure. I think we almost ran out of that deck in one of our games. We were very close to running out. I think we only had a few cards left in there. So you're still under time pressure, and so it's more like the time pressure of like, how are we going to complete all these missions and then get the ring thrown into Mordor in the time that we have to finish the game. But at the same time, there are some of those moments where, like, I remember in our last game, we had this massive group of troops marching from Ruin, and there was nothing we could do about it. We were just lucky we managed to finish the game before they started conquering our strongholds, because they're basically just going to wipe through, and every time you lose a stronghold, you lose 3 hope, is it?
Yeah.
Something like that. And you've only got a maximum of 8 hope that you can have on the hope track. So if you start losing a couple of strongholds in a row, you're going to lose the game pretty quickly as well. So it is possible that you can get into those situations where it feels like the game is really trying to get you. But it definitely felt like the games that we had were more worried about, like, how are we going to complete these missions in the time that we have.
Yeah, there is that element of luck. We've had, and I think our second or third last game, we had some really bad luck, followed by some really good luck. So I was like, oh, well, we still won, but man, we probably didn't deserve to win, or, we shouldn't have won, but that last dice roll was like...
One on the dice roll, yeah.
But we had a real hard time in the few turns before that. So I do think, though, that dialing down the puzzle and raising up the luck a little bit is probably a really good service to the theme.
Yeah.
Because this is definitely a gamer's game. Let's not joke about it. This is not a game you show your nana who likes to read the books. Like, it's a meaty game. It's not, not a big heavy euro, but it's still a fairly complex game for a non-gamer.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's so overly complex that a big diehard fan of Lord of the Rings is not going to try it out, at least. So I haven't had much experience in this kind of vein of game design, really at all. Designing to a theme, designing to an IP. But it's got to be a real challenge. Like, you have to do a service to the fans, of course, and to the original material, while also trying to make it a good game, hopefully a great game. My only real experience is actually designing for lesser known IPs, I guess you could say. So I think the first one would have been, I think it actually would have been when Paul Tobin approached me for Storm Raiders. So he was working on this little IP, well, I say little IP, an IP that no one knew about, that he had been working on for a long time, most of his life really. He'd done RPGs set in the world and stuff, and he approached me about making a game set in that universe he is working on. And his main frame of reference was he loved playing Forbidden Desert, which is also built upon the Pandemic system. So he's like, I want to have it co-op. I want to have it, well, not necessarily co-op, but the kind of feel of threat. I want to have a storm. He kind of gave me these kind of, I guess, like headlines of what the game should have in it, what it should be. And man, I struggled with that game for many years. Like, I think I redesigned it about 5 or 6 times from the ground up, because it's so hard to design to someone else's vision, even if it's not an IP. If it's just like, oh, make this game for me, please. Really tough. I mean, some people are obviously very good at doing it, but I'm not one of those people. The next time would have been Bethel Woods, which was a little audiobook type thing based on from the band Falling Up, Jesse Raborti's work. That was very abstract, and I guess also inspired a bit by a Pandemic. So it's a very puzzly kind of cooperative, solo-esque kind of game. And I'm not saying I hit the theme well in that game either, but it's a real challenge to try and make a game that services the fans and is also a great game.
Yeah.
And so I think hats off for this one to Matt Leacock, because it does a great job of it. I would just also just say that I think the Star Wars one is also great, but doesn't quite hit it as hard as this one does. So in the Star Wars one, you still feel the game quite strongly.
That's right.
Whereas in this one, I think you really do feel the theme a lot more. And it's a slightly better game as well. Whereas I do still like the Star Wars one, but I think Lord of the Rings version is the better version of the two.
Yeah, I totally concur that this is an IP game done really well. And I want to ask you the question, because you said that you've experienced designing these games before. Are there things that you would do differently if you were to do it again, say Storm Raiders from the start? Or what tips, what advice would you give listeners or even yourself for designing a game to someone else's vision, or designing a game to a fan base that already knows and loves the world that you're designing in? Because surely it must be a slightly different approach than just designing a new ancient anthology game.
Yeah, so first tip is don't hire me to do it because I'm not very good at it.
And the second one is get someone else to give you a tip.
That's two great tips. Although,
okay.
all right, so on the other side of things, I've watched Bobby Hill working on Orbit Star, which is another game Arcus is published next year, which is based around a fantasy world by Wayne Barlow, it's basically a scientific journal of an alien planet. So the book itself is an illustrated book, and he's writing as this scientist who's visited this Darwin 4, I think it's called, this planet, and he's logging all the details about the fauna and the flora and all that kind of stuff. So Bobby just digested that book like a few times through it, and he has nailed the theme of that game like so well. So like there are certain people that are very good at doing that. So if we were to talk about this, I'd throw the question to Bobby. I'm like, how do you do it, Bobby? But from what I can see and how I've seen him, say, design the Anarchy and Hadrian's Wall as well, is he will just get every single aspect of that theme, and he'll list them out, and he'll put out every little detail, and he'll try and see how can I work this into the game in a natural way.
Yeah.
For me, I would get very hung up on, but what is the game? Like, what are you doing? What is the actions? And that's because I design much more from an abstract space where I'm trying to create systems and puzzles and things. So I guess the first advice, if I can give any, not really any authority on this, but is probably to approach it from the other side. How can you best present the theme? And the game kind of has to take a second step, I think, a back step for that. But if you can hit the game hard as well, then yeah. I mean, that's why this game works, right? It's built on such a solid game on Pandemic. And he's just done these tweaks, these changes to make it work. So he's already building on a great game.
Right.
So even if he missed the mark and it became a good game, it would still be good. It's pretty hard to fail at making a Pandemic game. Well, unless you hate Pandemic, of course, but in my opinion, it's already a great game. So how can you really go wrong with it? So it's more about can you make the theme shine, I think, at that point. But starting from the ground up, yeah, that's a challenge for sure.
Yeah, great advice.
My advice is I have no idea what I'm doing. Yeah, cool.
Man, I'm taking notes. I've tried designing to spec once or twice and really, really struggle with it. For some reason, those restrictions, sometimes restrictions are great, right? And we even enforce restrictions ourselves when we're doing the medieval games. With the South Tigris, it was very strong. Come up with new dice mechanisms for each of them. And that was fun, and that was helpful for designing the games. And even with those games, we did have a lot of thematic direction before even working on the mechanisms of the games, which was different, I think, from the West Kingdom. But to go the next level and to do a fully thematic game, not just like a game that's, has a good, strong setting and strong reasons for doing things, but to be an immersive thematic game and then to someone else's spec and someone else's vision, I think that becomes really, really hard because you start to really feel those walls. You start to really feel those restrictions kind of impeding your own creativity and your own license to design what you want to play.
Yeah, and on the topic of restrictions, Sam, we're designing the East right now, right? So we kind of had this vision. We've designed the first game, we're developing it still, testing it still, but from that first game, we kind of thought, well, maybe this is the direction mechanically that these games can go. And we did have 3 themes kind of sort of planned out. And what we've been, even this week and last week, talking about together is these restrictions are kind of stopping us from being inspired to make the next games. So we're at this roadblock, that restriction, that thing we thought was going to be the cool thing about the trilogy is kind of stopping us from making these games because we're not inspired by them, we're not excited to design them. So, a couple of days ago, we were talking about this, or yesterday, I think it was, and spitballing ideas for something different. And suddenly it's like, oh, now I want to work on this because that restriction's removed. So I'm definitely all for restrictions in game design because it really helps you focus. But sometimes you actually need to remove them. So random takeaway, but yeah.
Yeah, it's noticing whether they're inhibiting you or they're helping you, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes you need just to narrow down the sandpit a little bit and know which area you want to play in. But when that starts to feel like, actually, no, this isn't where I want to play, open it wide open again and see where you end up. And then maybe some more restrictions later on and just kind of play around with adding restrictions, taking them away and seeing if that's going to help your direction.
I think it's a fun conversation to have, though. I remember a few weeks ago, me and Sam were we're driving back to our to where we live because we carpool together when I come to the office, and we were just like, so Sam is reading The Wheel of Time at the moment, which is one of my favorite book series, and he's on the last book. And it's like, oh, it's really cool. He's like, what would we do if we rethemed Chaos Order, which is a game that we absolutely love. Me and Sam are really proud of it, but it didn't quite, like knock it out of the park in terms of sales and in terms of popularity. So we're like, if we could retheme Chaos Order in any theme, if we could retheme it as the Wheel of Time, who would the factions be? Like, how can we match like factions from the Wheel of Time to factions in the game? You might have to mess with them a little bit, but there are any that kind of fit the identity of the certain factions and stuff like that. So it was quite a fun conversation to have to like, how could you rework one of your games into a theme and try and have it fit? And so there could be something fun around that sort of like building on a game system that you've already done. Like I'm sure Matt Leacock, that's kind of like what he's been able to do. It's like, how can I rework this into Star Wars? How can I rework this into the Lord of the Rings? So I can see like that could be quite a fun and inspiring experience as well. I'm sure on the other end of things, there could be some really frustrating kind of like walls that he hit up against in those designs that he had to overcome, because you obviously can't just be like, oh, this theme doesn't work, I'm going to something else. If you've signed a contract or whatever, you have to do it. But definitely, at least at a theoretical level, I find it quite fun.
I want to talk about a few of the things that I think this game does really, really well. I think where it excels is in the replay value. And I think this is due to several different things. We've touched on the missions, the fact that there are lots of different missions that feel thematic and they feel different. And they mean that on any given game, there's particular hot points on the map, which force you to play differently, force you to explore different areas. So I think those are great. But then also the fact that players will play not just as one character, but two characters. The characters have completely different play styles. They're good at certain things. And it gives the player that kind of exciting feeling at the start of the game where they want to try and build this OP synergy. And I really liked my squad with Faramir and Éomer. I thought that was just such a sick squad where I could protect my units and fight for free. It was so cool. So I think this combination of different missions each time, different characters that you can play as and finding synergies between them, but also just the little masterstroke of saying each character starts in a different spot, which means you're going to play the game differently based on where you start. Because it's a big map. And so if a lot of us are in Gondor and like Rivendell at the start, then we're going to notice no one being in that northern area where Gimli wants to hang out, where Galadriel wants to hang out. And so we're going to be weak in those areas. So all of these things, I think, make the variety, the variability from game to game, like through the roof. And also to add to that, what we've already talked about with the threat deck, like those starting 9 cards that you're going to get and the first few after that before you get the Skies Darken card, they're also going to give a different texture to the game. So yeah, guys, take your pick. Any of the things with variability that you want to talk about.
Well, let's talk about the characters. I mean, we were just talking about how great the theme is, but I think the theme is amazing in the characters because, for example, the last game I played, I was playing as Merry and Pippin, who's a single character, and as Galadriel, who's my other character. And Galadriel, what she can do, for example, one of the actions that she can do once per turn is she can look at the deck of player cards at the top 4 cards and then reorder them basically to choose what she's going to get and what the next person after her is going to get. And it's great because, it's a great part of the game in terms of making sure the right person get the right cards. But it's like Galadriel was someone in Lord of the Rings who could see somewhat into the future. And so it makes sense thematically. Or Merry and Pippin, I could play one of my heart tokens to bring 2 Nazgûl to where I was. Now, there's a reason you want to do this because if the eye is on Frodo and if there's Nazgûl on Frodo, then he's going to have to, or like if there's Nazgûl in the area that he's in, he's going to have to roll checks every time he moves because they're searching for him. And if the eye's on him, I think he's going to lose hope as well. I can't remember exactly. So it was really good to be able to draw those Nazgûl away. But that thematically makes sense because why did Merry and Pippin get taken to Isengard? Because they thought that they were the ring bearers because they were also 2 hobbits. So it's great thematically being like, well, we're the decoy. We're able to make people think that we're the ring bearers. And, a bunch of other characters, all similar things. I mean, you guys can talk about, you've played a lot more games than me and you've seen a lot more of the characters. Like they just have all these little thematic touches that just make it feel immersive in the experience.
Yeah, and it leads to funny moments as well. Like you mentioned Galadriel kind of looking into the future. Well, in that play where you were Galadriel, you did it about 3 times. You were just standing in Moria the whole time because you're using your 4 actions on someone else. You're standing in Moria amidst all these goblins, just looking into your crystal ball. And I'm like, wait, she's gone down the dark path. Like she's found some like ancient dark like wizard relics, and like this is not good. We shouldn't be using this ability. And then finally Zach takes a turn to like actually use 4 actions with Galadriel. And she goes to Dol Guldur, the other evil stronghold, and she starts looking into the dark crystal ball there. I'm like, dude, you need to come out and see the light, man.
The other kind of cool aspect is how many layers these characters have. So in most other pandemics, they have one single use, like they have one power. Like base pandemic, you've got the one person who can always share any card, someone who can always not eradicate, but cure diseases for one less card, like very simple powers. And then we've seen little riffs on that where they're slightly different, but I think the Fall of Rome was similar, but you had like a certain die face that had a special power for your character. So like, 2 layers to that character. In this one, there's really like 3 layers to most of the characters. You have this effect, and this effect. And then on top of that, like you're saying, Sam, the synergies between which 2 you have together are quite impactful. So, and there's so many different versions of what that could be, right? Like how many characters are there? There's like 12 or more, I think, 15 maybe characters, and all those different, variations of those pairs together, and how they can synergize, and how if I have these 2 and you have those 2 or whatever it might be, it's going to change the game quite drastically. Not just because of like they're different, but because they're also so multi-layered, multifaceted to those characters. And there's plenty of characters that like can let you draw a certain token. So I think Legolas says you can always, as an action, once per turn, get a cloak, get a garb token. And then if you have a character that can then spend those tokens, then wow, that's cool. You can kind of combo them together. And there's plenty of examples like that in the game as well.
Yeah, so I think the replay value is super high from all of these different kind of random factors, and this is a great way to use randomness, but also player choice, like the choices they make on setup, who they want to play, to make each game feel unique. The one kind of mark against it, I would say, is it shouldn't really be a massive mark against it because it does give this kind of solidity, this feeling of continuity between plays, is the fact that someone has to play Frodo and Sam. And it's always that same mission every time. Now, that's the story of Lord of the Rings. So I don't know if I should even give that as a knock against it. But if you play that character, it does start feeling like it's quite rote. You might take different paths and different things, but you start to learn the kinds of things you're supposed to do with them. You move out of areas when there's the eye there. You make sure that you cash in your cards at havens when you can get extra tokens for them. And you basically just be a big needy person who needs everyone's rings and everyone's cloaks. Thank you very much, And it's fine. It's all good because the rest of the puzzle, the rest of the game, all the missions are very compelling. And it kind of makes sure that the whole game feels like Lord of the Rings. But that is my one kind of knock against it, is that, the overarching thing that happens each game will be the same. You'll do lots of stuff and eventually you'll make your way to Mordor and throw the ring into the fire. And sometimes that ending is not as climactic as you want it to be. It's like the Nazgûl just get ruined by bad RNG and they're hanging out near Rivendell. And it's like, dudes, like we're all the way in Mordor, mate. Like, how did you end up over there?
Well, I think our last game, Shem pulled out the Council of Elrond card, and I was like, all right, basically it would send any 2 heroes to Rivendell. And because I had Merry and Pippin, I could draw the Nazgûl away. So we went and had the Council of Elrond, like, at the same time that Frodo was actually throwing the ring into the into the volcano. So but I do agree, and I very much felt like it was like, Bag's not playing Frodo this game, because it's like no one really wants to play Frodo. It's kind of like the most boring role of all. You guys really stitched me up because the first time we played, I was Frodo and Smeagol, and like I don't think Smeagol could actually fight as well. And so it was like with Frodo, it's like you can't really fight because you have to roll checks if you ever go to where troops are and stuff like that before you can actually then fight the battle. And Smeagol couldn't actually battle. He could just like kill the odd troop every now and then. So I was pretty stitched up. They're pretty synergistic together, but yeah, that is one mark against the game. And you do wonder if there could have been a way to have Frodo in the game as like a NPC if you didn't want to play with him and you just had to protect him as he walked down the track or something like that. But yeah, it is what it is, and it's the story.
Yeah, I agree totally. And I think it's less noticeable with more players. So if Sam and I were only playing as two player and Zach never played it, I think we'd be a bit more over that combo quickly. But the fact we had it like, I think maybe 3 or 4 times three player, you didn't notice it so much because it was every third game that one of us had to play as Sam and Frodo. But you're right, I think there are some combos that don't work that well together. I played as, I think it's Sam and Frodo with Gandalf. And at some point, Gandalf the Grey dies and is removed from the map. So you're stuck with one character for 2 or 3 turns, maybe more. I think Boromir has a similar story where he can get removed from the map, which is not cool if you're playing with the other really boring character. And you're already like in a situation that you're already like in Ithilien. It's a hard word to say, Ithilien. And you've got nothing to do. You're just waiting for the rings to show up. And that's your only character to use. And you're like, well, what else do I do with my character? And that's my other little knock on the game is there are some turns where you have actions that just don't mean anything. And I think we got rid of this a bit more in our later plays. I had some in our last game, but in some of our earlier plays, we were like, well, I guess I'll just do nothing. Like, and it felt kind of like, well, that's not exciting, for a player. But yeah, it's a hard one because it's not in every game and it's not that noticeable, but it is a thing that's there, I think. You're asking about how else could they have done this, like as an NPC. And I think if I was doing this, my initial, I guess, thought process would have been, oh, Frodo is the timer. Like there's a timer in the game and he's moving every turn. And when he gets there, the game's over. But that's boring, right? That's just like, that's the most obvious thing to do in this kind of game is that you bring in the theme through some mechanical system that the players don't really need to worry about. Where it's just like, he's just the time track moving along. He gets to Mordor. Have you won yet? No, yes, whatever. So the fact that they got him in there as a character is really cool. But yeah, there are some caveats and there are some things where yeah, it's cool, but you do it every game, and yeah, you don't want to be the player doing it, and some combos don't work. So, but if you take him away from the game, then you lose all that theme, You lose all that, like, what do we do in the game? What is the story?
Yeah.
And I think we even talked about it like weeks ago when we were first playing it. Like, oh, can you play the Hobbit story on this map? Like, what does that look like? And I think you're like, well, you ignore like 70% of the map, so it's not that great. So, you could do versions of this where it's like different stories, untold stories of, of Middle Earth, but you wouldn't get the theme so much. You wouldn't be as exciting as knowing everyone knows the main story, right? If you play this game, you know the main story of the trilogy. So it kind of has to be told every time. While that might be an issue mechanically, I think Matt Leacock did a pretty good job of making this work. Like, yes, there are some minor flaws to it, and it can be a bit mundane being that character, but I can't see a better version of it personally. Yeah.
100%. 100%. It's an absolute triumph. It's a masterpiece of a game design, of a thematic game and as a representation of a prior game, which, it doesn't just feel like Pandemic 2.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it really does feel like its own game, but there's those familiar elements to the system where you can kind of latch onto and it will help you to learn the game as well. Did you want to talk a little bit, Shem, about reworking existing systems, because you've done Shipwrights, which is a completely new version. It's not even the same game. It's a redux of an old game. But you also did Raiders of Scythia and kind of how you approach doing new versions of an older game.
Yeah, sure. I mean, there's a good discussion there around about, like, as a designer, what do you want to be doing? Do you want to be redesigning the same game again and again, or do you want to always do something different? A lot of it comes down to, like, I guess, what are you motivated to? What really gives you that satisfaction in design? I don't think I could do what Matt Leacock's done. I don't think I could keep designing, it sounds harsh, but the same game. They are definitely different games, but built on the very same system. I don't think I could keep doing it for that many years over and over again, purely because, while there are these differences, it's still that same puzzle. And I was saying this to you, Sam, yesterday about Bethel Woods, how I kind of went back to the game and thought, can I redo it? Can I change it? And I kind of got a working version that was using cards instead of tokens and all this stuff. But after a few plays, I was like, it's still the same puzzle.
Right.
I'm still kind of designing the same game again. And it wasn't satisfying as a designer to kind of make the same game again. But maybe that's because, being honest, Bethel Woods isn't Pandemic. And it's not as like satisfying to play as Pandemic. So yeah, it's a tough one. I mean, talking about Raiders, like Raiders is, I would say, without being arrogant, is more in that vein of like, it's a great game and it's a great core system. So designing in that same game again is quite fun because it's fun to play and to replay it over and over again and twist it and stuff and, make changes for Scythia like I did. So whereas a simpler game like Bethel Woods, it's kind of hard to really like feel like I'm making something fresh when the original system is like, It's good. Like it's good. It's a good puzzle, but it's kind of not that deep to design in. Whereas Pandemic is a very strong system to design in. So I would imagine Matt's doing it not just for the money, but because he enjoys playing it in that space and redesigning the game, because he's done it so many times now. And that's not counting like the Forbidden Islands and stuff and the kind of branch of games which use a similar system. But all that to say, so going from, say, Raiders of the North Sea to Raiders of Scythia was actually a ton of fun because you guys hinted earlier about, well, not hinted, you kind of talked earlier about your discussion around Chaos Order and like if it was in the Wheel of Time universe, how would that look? That was the approach I took for Scythia. It was like, well, if these are no longer Vikings and there's something else, and when I landed on the Scythians, I did some research and thought, well, the Scythians, from what I can see, didn't actually want to die. Like they weren't like the Vikings where they wanted a glorious death in battle. So having a Valkyrie system doesn't make sense.
I'd say it's pretty normal, you know.
Yeah.
I'd say, yeah.
Scythians, well, they were brutal savages, and the Greeks like basically referred them as like the most barbaric people they've ever seen. Like they didn't, from what I can see, want to die in battle. They wanted to live. They wanted to gain gold and be rich and powerful. So having a system like the Valkyrie in the original Raiders doesn't make sense for the Scythians. So it's really a matter of like figuring out the theme. Who are these kind of characters and what are they trying to do? And like what is the flavor of their civ, I guess, if that's a way of saying it, which led me to learn about them training eagles for combat and for hunting. They love their horses. They were renowned for like horseback riding and using composite bows while facing backwards or upside down on a horse and firing at enemies. So it was about bringing in that kind of stuff into the game. So I took out the Valkyrie, and for me that was like, this might ruin the game because that's a big part of what makes Raiders cool. And then I thought, how can I bring in these animals? And it was about building upon the armor track. So in original Raiders, the armor track's just a track where you kind of bank strength for future battles. It's just you go up and up, you get stronger and stronger for every future battle. And it was a way of kind of going, can I make this more interesting? So if you choose a horse, you're kind of choosing the difference of points versus strength. You can go for like tons of endgame points, but not very strong horses, or go for the big strong horses that don't give you points, but they'll give you more combat points as you fight. And then I kind of made them dual aid cards so that you could have eagles in there, and there's a reason for that market to cycle more, that kind of stuff. Yeah, it was really about addressing the theme. Of course, it's not an IP, so I'm not trying to like satisfy an audience, a fan base for the Scythians. Like, there's not this massive like Scythian following out there that I'm aware of, at least. But it was a similar approach of like, how do I best bring this theme into an existing game and ideally make it an equally good game, if not a better game. That's always debatable, of course, of what your preference is. But because Raiders is a solid system and it's quite a simple system at its core, like it was hard to fail, I guess is the thing. So
right,
if you're trying to make a game that's based on a game that maybe isn't an amazing game, like I was saying before, it's going to be more of a challenge, I think, to really rework a game. But if you've got a really solid game, I think change the theme isn't too difficult. So long as you can, I think, bring something fresh. And I mean, what I was saying with the Valkyrie, it's like I was really throwing out a really good part of the game. So I had to really make up for that. So if you can do that, then I think it should work.
I'm not going to say anything at all. If I speak, I will be in trouble.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yep. I see what you're saying.
Jose Mourinho meme, man.
Well, I mean, there's a game. How much can I say? There's a game that Shem and I co-designed that we might be doing another version of. I don't know if that's allowed. Is that allowed to be said? Has that been said already? People can now guess what that is. But there was a really cool system in that game which had to be thrown out because it didn't match the kind of the theme or the kind of focus of the game. And so that's something that is lost from the game. So we had to make it cooler in other areas, essentially. And we added all these other cool ways to do things. Yeah, that's all I'm going to say. Yeah.
Sam's walking on the tightrope.
Really insightful comments from me. Really insightful.
I think that is actually quite a good approach for this kind of project, right? Like if you do have a game, let's say you've got a published game, it's a well-loved game, and your approach to make a new version of it for another publisher, or you yourself want to make a new version of it for a different theme. I think a really good challenge is to think, what is the best thing I can remove without destroying the game? Because that's going to set it apart from the original version quite strongly. So like one of the things about original Pandemic, there's two things, I guess. One is having 5 cards of color. The other one is the research stations that give you like amazing movement across the map. Like those things are gone in this version. Like they're not there at all, like barely. So if you can pull that stuff out and you're still left with a playable game, It allows space to bring in something fresh. And you really want these two games, if you're doing two games, to stand apart. You got the Terra Mystica Gaia Project is another example where like those tracks in Gaia Project, they're not there in Terra Mystica. Like it's something quite fresh.
Right.
Yeah.
So you could even ask yourself the question, would it be... This section of the podcast has been redacted. We'd like to apologise to our listeners for any inconvenience caused. We hope you've enjoyed our discussion about Fate of the Fellowship, but we'd love to hear from you. Jump on the Garphill Games Discord and let us know in the podcast channel if you've played it and what you thought. Which is your favourite version of Pandemic and why? And are there any of our games that you would like to see re-implemented in a different setting? Welcome back to our BGG Top 200 draft. We're back again, this time with games 81 to 90. Now, as with every week, I will be picking second. Sam, this time, is going to be picking first, which means that Shem will be banning a game and then last picking. I'm going to read out the games, and then we're just going to get right into the draft, as I'm sure you all know the drill so far. I repeat, we have taken a screenshot of how the list was when we first started this draft, so these games may not be the same ones if you look from 81 to 90 now. The games are Android Netrunner, Agricola Revised Edition, The White Castle, Mechs vs. Minions, The Crew, The Quest for Planet 9, Kingdom Death, Monster, Race for the Galaxy, Blood on the Clock Tower, Azul, and Great Western Trail, New Zealand. So, can you take us away with a ban, Shem?
I sure can. I like how you said Kingdom Death Monster. I always find it funny with a game where it's like, where's the next Kingdom Death game coming out? Yeah, well, they still haven't released all the expansions.
It's always said Kingdom Death Monster. Like it's a death monster, but it's not. It's Kingdom Death, monster.
Yeah. I mean, at least with Circadian Strike, we did 2 games, so it kind of made sense that there was the colon, right?
Well, I'm waiting for the next Kingdom Death human game to come out or Kingdom Death something else game to come out, but we'll see.
Kingdom Death Peacock.
Thank you
try
for
that on.
All right.
Yeah.
So there's often a debate around Race for the Galaxy versus Roll for the Galaxy. And many people will say that Race is better. I, however, much prefer Roll for the Galaxy. So I will ban Race for the Galaxy.
Okay, well, that leaves me with first pick. Now, I've already got the Crew. I've already got the Crew Mission Deep Sea. I love both of them. This would be an insta pick if I didn't have the other one. So I'm a bit sad that it makes it available for someone else to be picked because I think that's a bit lame. But, fine. I think my one is widely considered the better one, the second version, although I might even debate myself on that one. But anyway, I'm not going to pick another Crew game. I'm instead going to pick... Oh, it's a tough one between Mechs vs. Minions and Azul. I think Azul probably is the more timeless game and is probably the better choice, but I'm going to go Mechs vs. Minions. I like League of Legends. I like Riot Games as the IP. The game is really fresh, and making a game and production that good for a first-timer, it's just crazy, like how good the game is and also how amazing the production is. And they don't even make board games. They don't make tabletop games, really. They're a video game company. But there was a bit of a joke in the League of Legends community because they were called Riot Games for 7 years until this game came out. And this made them Riot Games, not Riot Game, because they literally only had one game for 7 years until this came out. So this put the S in Riot Games. Mechs vs. Minions, a fantastic game. That's going to be my pick.
Right. Well, I've only played a few of the games here. Actually, more than some of maybe the other 10s that we've had. So I have played Azul, have played the White Castle, have played the Crew. I've played a Great Western Trail. I haven't played the New Zealand one. But I couldn't pick the New Zealand one just because of that weird map with all the islands, man. It might be a good game, but that's just that just messes with me. If anyone's played that and hasn't looked at a map of New Zealand, that's got nothing to do with New Zealand. All right, so I'm going to pick the Crew, Quest for Planet 9. Sam left that for me. It is a really great game. Had a lot of fun playing it recently with Sam and his game group, and I was definitely the hidden trader a few times. But it's a trick-taking cooperative game, and it's really clever, and I don't think I need to say much more about it because most people have probably played it, and it's already been picked by Sam, the other version of it.
Brilliant.
So I'll take advantage of the fact that multiple versions of the same game exist, basically.
Well, I have 3 9s on this list, amazingly. Sam has taken one of them. And Mix vs. Millions is a really good game. The other 2 are the White Castle and Azul, and both very good games. But I think, like Sam was saying, the longevity and just like for Azul to be that good at this time in history is a bit of a crime because it should have been designed 20 years ago or more based on like how pure it is as an abstract game and how simple it is as a concept. But it's just so good. So good.
Yeah.
I haven't played the White Castle enough to raise it above, even though it's to a 9. I don't do 0.5s and stuff on BGG. I really enjoyed the White Castle a lot. I'd like to play it some more. But Azul, I can play that with my kids and lose still to my young daughters. And it's just a game that I could teach almost anyone, I think. It's got a nice level of puzzle to interaction. And it's just, I know it's a game that will just last. It's one of those instant classics. Like, it'll be around for years to come. I don't really care for all the different versions. The core game of Azul is great as it is, but that is going to be my pick. A really solid abstract puzzle game.
I love how mean it is as well. Like a lot of these puzzle games, they're not that mean. But this one, it's really easy to pay attention and to be able to pass what everyone wants to do and what everyone wants to take. And so you really just get in people's faces, right? You leave them with tricky decisions. And I love that. I love a abstract game with teeth, because there's a lot of these abstract puzzle games where there is an interaction, which is fine. They're kind of cozy and stuff. But this one, I don't know. Maybe it's cozy for some people, but it's kind of a bit more mean, elbows out kind of styles.
Like it's very interactive, but you have that foresight. You can think, if I take this, they'll definitely take that, and then I'm stuck with that. So, actually, I won't take that. I'll take this, and then
flow-on effects.
Yeah,
kind of like the draft. Kind of like if I ban this, then this is going to get taken.
Exactly. It is a draft. Yeah. So it's like yes, it can be very mean, and you can get dumped on with like 4 red tokens you cannot place. But if you actually think about it, you can see that coming, so you can adapt to it and stuff. So. It's often like if you got stuck with something bad, it's because it was your own fault and you didn't do something better a few turns ago or something. So no, it's really good solid game, and I'll probably play that for the rest of my life on and off.
Nice. Well, only one more podcast and we've got 10 games each, so it's going pretty quick, it feels like.
Yeah, my list is surely winning.
Yeah, we'll have to have a vote after we've each got 10, see who's winning at that point. Get people in the Discord or on social media to weigh in with their opinions, and then see if after the next 10 games someone else is winning. Till next time. Thanks for listening to the Lens and Veil podcast. This podcast is brought to you by Garphill Games. You can follow Garphill Games on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Blue Sky, X, and YouTube by subscribing to our newsletter at garphill.com or by joining the Garphill Discord server.
What does Sauron actually do? Like, you know how he's an eye? Is he actually like sitting in a chair somewhere? Like, we don't find out what he's actually up to.
He doesn't have a physical body, man.
I mean, he doesn't.
No.
He's just this kind of ethereal thing that
he's a spirit.
I don't know. They don't really go into that, do they? It's just a big eye.
Well, he was in is it Dol Guldur, the one in the place in Mirkwood? So he was there as like a spirit. He was raising, I don't know, evil things
necromancer.
There. As the necromancer, and then they kicked him out.
But how does an eye wear a ring? Like, well, how is he actually going to put that on his finger? Like, what's he going to do? Is it like an eye ring? Like, what was he actually going to do? He can't get his hands on it. What was going to happen? These are the things that we don't know. Anyway.